Hello, friends. Thank you for joining His Love is Power podcast. I'm your host, Ken Porter. His Love is Power podcast is about encouraging men to be in community with other men that want to grow in relationship with Jesus. Why do we feel this is so important? Well, because God's word tells us in Hebrews 10, 24, and 25, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. You see, we are created to live in community. This podcast is about people sharing their stories of coming to know and follow Jesus, but also about how being in community with other followers of Jesus has changed their lives. Please join us in this adventure as we spur each other on towards love, good deeds, and encourage one another in Jesus. Howard, my good friend, I'm so grateful we're doing this together. Your story, I know your story, and I know I'm going to learn more about your story tonight.
Feel free to ask questions.
That's cool. I will.
I'll leave something out. I know, and if you want to know about it, ask me.
What the Holy Spirit will lead us both, and what needs to be said will be said, and I'm excited because I do know your story. I think your story is going to be fascinating for the listeners out there, and I'm just excited to hear what you have to say, and so thank you very much for being on the podcast. I'm really grateful.
I'm honored to be on your podcast.
Thank you. And I'll tell you,
my massage therapist, I was getting a massage today, and she was like, "Well, I want to see a copy of. I'll send it to my husband because he's a believer." And she's like, "He needs men like that." I'm like, "Well, have him listen, and then if he wants to, he can come down and try us out."
Absolutely.
Over by Belfair, and I'm like, "Come on, that's not that far."
Well, the whole point of the podcast is to get men excited about being in relationship, being in community. Yeah. You and I have been in community for a long time.
You were gone to boot camp, the first one, my first Saturday, and so I don't know how many years that is. I'll just have to defer to you because I lost track. The days.
About 10. I think the first boot camp was in either 2014 or 2015, somewhere around there.
So about there.
And I just have to say this too, is that this has been postponed a week to do this. And then today, literally, I've been dealing with technology issues with my phone for the last 2 days. I literally ran in the door, set up my computer. I hope everything's working. Normally I test everything, and it's like, okay, Lord, we're just trusting you. We pray to you that the technology is working. So we've been talking about how the evil one's been trying to get us to not do this, and so here we are. We're going to do it. So
bring both barrels. Here we go.
Yeah. So just start off with real simple. I'd love to hear your story. How about, your story is fascinating. And I've been going through your book again too.
So you can hold it up when it's appropriate.
Yeah, I'll grab a copy of it. I'll grab my copy and show it here in a second. Your book is fascinating, and so if I'll just share this right now. The book's called Addicted to Certainty, and it is an amazing, easy read. It's an amazing story, and so if you want to hear even dig deeper into Howard's story, it would be a great read. So.
It's available on Amazon in the Kindle form too, if you want.
Oh, cool.
So either on book, paperback, or Kindle.
Nice.
You have options. Yeah.
Okay.
And I was telling Mike, our fellow buddy, today that the subtitle is powerful too. It's The Journey of a Twice Recovering Fundamentalist.
Yes.
So we'll start with the first fundamentalist. So for those of you that don't know, the Mormon fundamentalists are the polygamists. So I grew up with 3 moms and 26 brothers and sisters. Just incredible. And if you're into numerology, my mom had 11 kids. I was her 3rd boy, her 7th child, and my dad's 12th child. So I had all the numbers covered. So I had to get safe.
Exactly.
A little joke there for the number freaks. So growing up with that many people. We didn't move into one home until I was in the 8th grade. And that was an experience. That was quite different. But I have two brothers. The three of us are 11 days apart. So we were the triplets of the family. And of course, we don't look anything alike because three different moms. And so my dad was a proud rooster strutting around. He had three strapping boys in 11 days. But that's the start of the story. But as I grew up, it was all I knew. So I made the best of it. My mom was very optimistic person, positive attitude stuff, and that rubbed off on me. And so I tried to make the best of it, and I didn't know.
That's where that comes from. You're a very positive person. I have to say that. I love your positivity, and so that's where that came from. That's cool.
I always told people my mom was this amazing woman that all 11 of her kids would say that they were her favorite, and I made the mistake of saying that in front of three sisters and two brothers, and they all called BS on me. I said, what? They said, you've always been her favorite. I'm like, no way. I thought the rest of you felt the same way. And they're like, nah, you dummy. You were the favorite. So I had an amazing relationship with my mom. But she'd tell me she'd be going out to the store or something, and I'd come running out. Can I go? And she'd say no. And I said, okay. And instead of throwing a fit, I'd just say, okay. And I go back in the house. And she never heard me cry in the crib, except when I was probably 18 months old, and she came down and she was, well, okay, what's the matter, Garrett? And I was plastered in the corner of a crib, and in the other corner was a spider. And I think the spider and I were equally afraid because I was setting up a ruckus. And so as an 18-year-old, I told my mom, I said, Mom, why am I so afraid of spiders? And she said, I didn't know you were. I'm like, yeah. And so then she thought about it and told me about that story. So then a bit like arachnophobia, I did therapy every time I stepped on a spider. But before that, I wouldn't even step on a daddy long leg. I had my sisters come get it. It was just bothered me. But she thought back and told me that story. So then I was able to buck up. And it's a good thing because Rhonda's afraid of spiders. I'd have to call the paramedics. We had a big spider in the house. But that's a little off the topic. So when I wrote my book, I thought maybe I'd title it that I was a 25-year-old divorced virgin.
I remember you talking about that topic or that title. I love that title, actually.
Yeah. Mike thought that the Twice Recovering Fundamentalist was a better title, but it's okay either way. So I'll get to that. So we grew up three different houses. Dad would take turns, just like clockwork. Every 3 nights he'd be at our house. And then we moved into one big house. In the 8th grade, they were widening a major thoroughfare in the city, and they condemned or public domain, whatever. So they had this 8-year-old triplex apartment that was 25 by 105. And it was flat tar roof, and it was only 8 years old. And the minimum bid was $2,000. It was a sealed bid auction. So my dad went with the competitive bid and the minimum bid. Nobody else showed up, so he got it for $2,000. It cost us $2,600 to move it in one piece from 33rd South to 9730 South, where we had 6.5 acres, and they put it on a full basement. So we had a boys' dorm in the one end and a girls' dorm in the other end. And if you were in school, you got your own bedroom, which was great. So mine was like 11 by 7 and just enough room for a dresser and a bed, and you had room for push-ups. That was about it. But we had a couple of 2 bathrooms on each end, 8 bathrooms in the house. And so there was, my goodness, 22 bedrooms total in the house.
Wow.
2 commercial water heaters. My mom could have done commercials from Maytag because she had the old avocado push button Maytags, and we wore out a half a dozen other machines next to those, and they just kept on going. We put one water pump in them in like 12 years in that Maytag. So
that's amazing.
It just wore out all the others, and they went 24/7, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. Yeah. Sunday we got the day off. Worked hard. My mom was raised in the Depression. She was born in 22, and so she didn't have the heart to throw anything away.
Yeah.
So she had a storage room in the house, which was really a junk room. But about once a year, the girls would take her somewhere for a piece of cake or something, and the boys would unload that all up in trucks and take it to the dump and get rid of it, or to the they don't have Goodwill in Utah. They have the DI, the Deseret Industries. And so it's just their system. And so we take the usable stuff there, but take it to a dump because she just couldn't part with it. She's like, in hard times, you'd appreciate that. It's like, yeah, Mom, we're not seeing hard times in a while. So we get rid of it. But she was very frugal. She would go to the local produce manager at the grocery stores and say, hey, when you got that fruit with a spot on it or that vegetable with a spot on it, if you throw it in a box, I'll come by every other day and gather it up. And we just cut the spot off and eat it. And so there wasn't anything wrong with the rest of it. And so she did things like that that really stretched the dollar for feeding, 22 mouths. So I learned a lot of frugality from her too. But as a young adult, it's such a sad statistic, but in Mormonism, teenage suicide is just out of control. Idaho, Utah is just horrible because, when you're a teenager, when you're growing up, your parents walk on water. They don't sin. They're holy, and scriptures like be holy as God is holy kind of just throw a burden on you. And I remember dreaming about or contemplating just driving the car right into a concrete overpass support and ending it because I just felt filthy. And yeah,
it's a workspace.
It's a workspace. You got to earn everything. And so there is no grace.
There's no grace.
What they believe Jesus did on the cross was to die for Adam's original sin, because they have the Adam God doctrine was taught by Joseph Smith that Adam was the God of this earth, came down to give us physical bodies. So his sin was that he digressed. So he went from a celestial being to a mortal being. So he got blood in his veins and all that instead of the celestial fluid you get resurrected with if you're a good guy, that kind of a thing. So he did that and set an example for us that we have to follow. So no grace involved there, no salvation on the cross. Blood of Jesus doesn't mean anything to them. It was never brought up. And so growing up, I just was tormented. And then I decided that I was going to go to college. I was first one of my dad's kids to go to school. I'd been out of high school for 6 years. And one of the influences that pushed me to go to college was a old teacher that I had in high school. And in the summers, he would work at the parts department in the dealership where I was working. And so he'd say, are you still here, Howard? Every spring when school was out in summer, June, he'd come to work and you're still here? You should go to college. And I'm like, yeah, I know. But I was in the top 3% of my class and all that kind of stuff. So I had Fortran and calculus in high school and that kind of stuff. And so I just got thinking and I thought, I can do this. So I took everything I had and moved to Cedar City, Utah. I thought I would play football for the team, and then I could be a football coach and a math teacher. And I thought if I was a lousy coach, I'd still have a job as a math teacher because they need math teachers. There's a shortage of those. And after one quarter of school, I found out that I could double my wages by being a straight math major and not a math teacher. My exiting income after I got out of college. And so I thought, okay, so I switched to a straight math major. Well, I'd missed the first quarter of calculus, and I didn't want to waste a whole year and start over as a sophomore. So I went and talked to the math professor and told him I'd had calculus in high school 7 years earlier. He gave me a couple tests and I passed. He says, okay, I'll let you do it, but don't you, he looked me in the eye, he said, don't you mess up, don't you fail. And I said, okay. And we got to be pretty good friends because he wasn't a Mormon. He was a Presbyterian. And so he would tell Mormon jokes and he and I would laugh and nobody else in the class would laugh. It didn't stop him. He could still do it. But he was a Dutchman, Jim Kotz. And he said, there'll be only one Dutch joke told in my classes and I'll tell it. Why Dutchmen wear wooden shoes? And we'd say no. And he says, to keep the woodpeckers off their heads. So we got to be buddies. But so I'm heading off to college.
So you're still at this point in time still practicing Mormon.
I'm still in the community and involved in all the rituals and all the stuff.
Now you didn't do, one of the things that young men, now the women do as well. They go on
on a 2-year mission.
mission. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you didn't do a mission.
Well, I did, but I got to
Okay.
stay home. So
Oh,
my older brothers, when they graduate, then they would go to Colorado City and Hilldale, that dual twin cities on the Utah-Arizona border, where the polygamist religion owned all the land. And so there weren't any nice houses built because you couldn't get a mortgage, building construction loan, anything like that. So you had to just go piecemeal as you could afford it. So when you went into town, 90% of the houses just had tar paper on the outside, no siding. They just had that for like weatherproofing or help with get the plywood all drenched with water. And so it was kind of interesting that way. So my mom had twin girls. To start out, she went full term with twin girls, over 15 pounds of baby between the two of them, and her stomach muscles completely separated. She was 56 inches around the waist. She didn't see her shoes for 2 months. My dad always produced some pretty big babies. I was 9, 12. My kid brother was 10 and a half pounds, and these two twins were 15 together. And so one of them married a guy that was a couple years older than her, and she had 15 kids. No twins, no multiples, just 15. And you'd never know it. She's like 5'7" and probably 135 pounds, just stately looking. And she just was a baby machine and spit them out right and left. In fact, my mom, when she was 97, she had a 6th generation photograph. So my sister Connie had 5 generations under her, and they tacked on my mom. And so that's probably close to a Guinness Book of Records, I think.
That is amazing.
6 generations. Talk about babies having babies. Wow. Yeah. So anyway, the other sister married the prophet. He was 72 and she was 17. Well, she didn't have any kids. So she kept her fingers in mom's kids' lives. And so when she found out I was coming down to Cedar City from Salt Lake to go to college, then she thought, okay, I need to make sure this guy doesn't go off the rails. So I get a phone call. The prophets, you're in that community, they call it courtship after marriage, which is obviously a recipe for disaster unless you really keep the women under your thumb. And so the prophet's supposed to get revelation from God who you're supposed to marry. So I got a phone call from the prophet at 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I was probably still half hungover from the night before, or half drunk from the night before partying. And he says, do you know? And he stops and he says, what's that girl's name? And either God was impersonating my sister or my sister was speaking for God. But she told him the girl's name. And he says, do you know her? And I said, no. And he said, I knew of her, but I'd never met her or talked to her. He says, well, I want you to meet her this afternoon and get married tomorrow. And as crazy as that is, that's the way my older brothers got married. They found out the day before. And the girls found out a week ahead of time so that they could make a dress or borrow a dress or whatever to make themselves cleaned up and ready to go.
Everything was fully arranged wedding.
Oh, yeah. And so I go to meet this girl, and I'm 24 years old, going to be a math major in college, and she was 17 and hadn't finished the 8th grade. So, and we're not talking about Liz Taylor with this thyroid problem. This girl was big. She was bigger than I was, and weight-wise, and I was going to be playing football for the school. So I married her the next day. As shocking as that sounds, I wasn't ready to jettison everything that I'd been taught. And I had volumes I had my own personal set of the Journals and Discourses, which was all the sermons from every president of the church, from their general conferences they do 4 times a year, stuff like that. And
what were you going through? What were you going through emotionally? Like, oh my gosh,
my mom was, as soon as I hung up with the prophet, 5 minutes later, my mom's on the phone. She's like, hey, we met her. She's a really sweet girl. She wasn't. Just follow the prophet and it'll be okay. That's their mantra, follow the prophet. And so I thought, well, maybe she is a sweet girl. I knew some large women that usually had 10 or 12 kids, and so they had a good reason to be large. But they were some of my favorite people. And so it wasn't the size that bugged me as much as the lack of intelligence and ability to communicate. She would have stopped us 3 or 4 times to ask what a word meant. And we're not using big words here. And so I went and met her. And the next day we went into St. George to the Justice of the Peace and got married. And he said, "You may now kiss the bride." And I gave her a little peck on the lips. And he chuckled and he said, "I bet you didn't win her with a kiss like that." And I thought, "Oh, brother, I didn't win anything. This is a booby prize." And so I tried to love her. But do we even know how to love until we accept Jesus' love? We're just a bunch of selfish animals. And so in my inept ability, I tried to love her. And after about 3.5 months, I swear it was like somebody threw a bucket of cold ice water on me. I woke up one day and I thought, okay, well, first, she was afraid of sex and I was unmotivated, so I hadn't consummated the marriage. And so I woke up and I thought, oh my gosh, with my luck, as soon as we do, she'll be pregnant and I'll be stuck. And stuck just kind of echoed in my head. It's like, are you getting this, boy? And I went, oh my gosh, I can do better than this blindfolded and drunk, you know? It was like, oh my goodness. And so I told her, I'm sorry, I don't love you. I tried to, but I don't. Go home, they'll give you to somebody that will. And you'll be happier. So she cried and cried. But the thing was, then my sister gets on the phone right away, as soon as she heard, and just take her back and we'll hush this up so nobody needs to know that you defied the prophet, was the implication. But she says, and within a year, we'll give you another wife that you can love. I'm like, no. That doesn't work. That's going to be miserable. You know, the marriage is hard enough anyway.
Yeah.
Looking back on 38 years of my own. And I just thought, no, that dog doesn't hunt. I'm not doing that. But then it was like, oh, you're the only one emotionally strong enough, stable enough to handle her problems. And I'm like, no, sorry, swing and a miss. And so they tried other methods to get me to take her back. And I just said, sorry, I made up my mind. I'm done. I'm out of here. I know that it means I'm kicked out of the religion. I'm going to go burn in hell, whatever. I'm not going to live hell now. And so my mom cried for 3 days because she had grand designs for me. And so I broke her heart for the first time. And I think the only time. But so I was a 25-year-old divorced virgin. And crazy. If I had done it 2 weeks earlier, I could have got an annulment, and instead it cost me $400 I didn't have, to get a divorce. But like my cousin says, that's been married 4 or 5 times, he says, you know why divorce costs so much? Because it's worth it. In my case, it was. So I was like a calf let out of the stall for the first time. I'd been so held down and held back. And so I just cut loose. I mean, so I partied hard on the weekends, but during the week I was, I had school to attend and I needed my gray cells to be working. And so I didn't party during the week, but my roommates, we were known for the best parties on campus, and my roommates sold the best dope. And so it was really not a good environment, but I was enjoying it at the time.
Right.
And then I had been on the dean's list every quarter, and the spring or the fall quarter of my junior year, fall quarter, I wasn't on the list. I'm like, what the heck? And they said, well, you only have 14 credits. You have to have 15 credits to be on the dean's list. And I'd been doing 22 credits a quarter, because I was paying my own way. I wanted to get it done fast. And I would go to school in the mornings and then work at the dealership in the afternoons as a mechanic. And that was perfect because in the winter, they're kind of slow on work. And in the summer, they're hammered. And so that was when I was out of school and I could make hay. The minimum wage at that time was $3.25, $3.25.
I remember making that wage. Yep.
Yeah, that was brutal. So I ended up, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought where we were talking about.
You're talking about going to school, not being on the dean's list.
Yeah, not being on the dean's list. And so the next 2 quarters, so spring quarter, I needed 1 more credit. And I looked it through the schedule and there was voice lessons for 1 credit. I'm like, sweet, I love to sing. So I see this, there's 2 voice instructors, and God had me coincidentally, we know what that means, select the only Christian in the school. And so I met with him and he says, well, I won't give you voice lessons unless you're in one of my choirs. And I'm like, okay, that's fun. I'll sing. And so 2 more credits and I was in the choir of his. So we're getting to be friends, and he knows my story. And this cute little blonde, not quite 5 feet tall, just a half an inch short, and of that, and blonde hair down past her behind, come walking into the choir room and talks to him and walks out. So after class, I'm like, who is that? And he says, oh, that's Heidi from Wisconsin. And she choreographed some of my vocal jazz ensemble because she was a dancer. She did clogging and stuff, and she was teaching and taking advanced classes, graduate classes at the school. And so I says, well, will you give me your number? And he says, I'll ask her if it's okay if I do. That's weird because in Mormonism, women are really property. They're just not respected. And it says right in when Joseph Smith's defending polygamy in the 132nd section of the Doctrine and Covenants, he says that he basically says that women belong to you. And so it's okay to have more than one wife because they belong to you. And so, in other words, they don't have a say. And so I was kind of surprised. It was the first instance where I'd heard a woman being respected. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I saw the difference and I liked it.
Yeah.
And so he says, I'll ask her. So he told her that I was an ex-polygamist, and that's how I've been raised. And boy, in Utah, the mamas always tell their daughters, don't marry an ex-polygamist because eventually they're going to go back and then you're going to be stuck. And I had a couple girlfriends that wouldn't go out with me after a certain stage when they found that out about me. And they said, no, sorry, I'm done. So it was kind of interesting. And so she prayed about it and felt like God gave her a green light. So he gave me her number and I called her up and I was playing it cool,
So
like
she was a Christian. She was a Mormon.
Yeah, she was a Christian from Wisconsin, and they went to church together. This music professor and her went to the same tiny little church. There was 4 of them in the congregation when I started going. So I added 25% with one body. So it was just a new church plant from a pastor from northern Utah. He'd planted a handful of churches in his life and came down to Cedar City to plant a church, fundamentalist Christian. So that's why the twice recovering fundamentalist thing. But so I called her up and said, hey, next time I see you on campus, then we'll set a date and see if it works for you and me, and we'll go out. She said, okay. So I saw her a handful of days later, and I was working at a dealership making way more than $3.25 an hour. And so I took her out to steak dinner and then a movie, and we got back to the dorms probably 11 o'clock. She was living in the dorms and I was in the party house. And so I hadn't even got the key out of the ignition. And she turned to me and said, so how do you feel about Jesus Christ? And I said, what? And I'm like, well, I believe he died on the cross and all that stuff. And she says, no, how do you feel about him as your personal savior? I'm like, what? And so we went into her dorm room and talked till 3 a.m. We quickly diverted to evolution versus creation. She was a devout creationist. And so finally, out of frustration, because I'm a pretty good arguer, she said, well, don't you believe what the Bible says? And I said, she says, do you know what it says? And I said, nope, never read it. I read all the Mormon books, but not the Bible. And so she lent me her Bible and a tract called To Moroni with Love, written by a guy from Issaquah, Ed Decker.
Ed Decker.
That did the Saints Alive in Jesus and Ex-Mormons for Jesus. And he did the film The God Makers about Mormonism, which was brilliant for its time. And so this tract, I opened it up, and it says that this is written out of love for the Mormon people. And his desire is either it would make you a better Mormon. And I thought, what? He says, or it would give you doubts about what you've been taught, and that you would look to the Bible for the answers. And so then he just laid out some Mormon theology. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. I could quote it to you, memorized, And then he'd list some Bible verses that contradicted it. And I was like, wow, because in the Mormon Articles of Faith, they say they believe the Bible to be the Word of God as far as it's translated correctly. Now, Joseph Smith made some corrections to the Bible that he says that God told him, just to make it fit their theology a little better. But I thought, okay. So I didn't know, Amos from Genesis. And so I'd have to look in the index. Okay, where's this book and the page? And I'd flip to it. And something inside me said, don't get trapped. And so I'd read the whole chapter he'd quote a couple verses, but I didn't want to have it be taken out of context. And so I was like, yeah, be careful, buddy. You just escaped one cult. Don't dive into another one. And so I'd read the whole chapter. Well, the word of God does a work in you. It doesn't return void. It does stuff. And so I'm plowing through this stuff. I know the Mormon stuff, so I'm looking for the verses. And I was just stunned that the Bible contradicted Mormonism so strongly when they call themselves Christians. And so I went, wow. And you know what hit me was I was afraid I wouldn't have fun anymore because it would be restrictive, just like the way I've been raised. That the only religion I knew just held you down. And so I thought, that was my quandary. So I thought, I'm a good guy, and God will give me a slap on the wrist for the bad and a pat on the back for the good, and he'll let me into heaven. And it happened to be when I was reading my way through Mark, and I got to chapter 9 where the rich young ruler asked Jesus, he calls him good master. And Jesus stopped him and said, there's no one good but God. And I'd known enough by then that I thought, this is the only person to live without sin. And he said, don't call me good. How the heck can I think that God's going to give me a slap on the wrist and a pat on the back? And so I was like, dang, he just kept pulling the rug out from under me. Every excuse I came up with. It just, and then finally, we all have our own standards, things so that we can feel like we're okay with ourselves. And I broke one of my cardinal rules, and I just went home and I was like, you're a filthy dog, what the heck? And I thought, so I got on my knees and I said, God, I need professional help. That's how I put it. I said, I need professional help. I don't know what I'm doing. The things I want to do, I don't do. The things I don't want to do, I end up doing. Thank you, Paul, for laying it out so clear.
Yeah.
Who's going to save me from this body of sin? And I gave my heart to the Lord. And I've been going to church with this gal, Heidi, from Wisconsin. And in the Sunday school class, the preacher was going through Revelation. And so that was one of the things I was like, man, that tribulation sounds pretty gnarly. I'll just wait until right before the rapture and then I'll give my heart to Jesus. Because I still wanted to have fun. Well, it didn't take too long to figure out if you don't know when something's going to happen, it's kind of impossible to do something right before it. It doesn't happen. So another rug pulled out from under me. And so I'd been going probably 3 or 4 months to this church, and I knew that I was supposed to become a new creation. And so the next morning I got up, I looked in the mirror, and I was disappointed because I looked the same. I was so naive. I didn't know that it was inside and not outside. I'm going to be a new creation.
I don't look like a new creation.
Yeah, exactly. I still look the same. What the heck? I still got the same mole over here and this and that. And so, but overnight, I quit swearing. It was crazy. I used to have the air was blue around my workstation. I mean, I would use the Lord's name twice in the same sentence when it wasn't even grammatically correct. Just throw it in there because I was ticked off and I had a temper. One day I grabbed a trash can. This bolt was fighting me. I couldn't get the socket on it, and it was fighting me. And I just grabbed this 25-gallon oil drum that was our trash can and put over my head and threw it down the center of the shop, and it rolled out into the parking lot, spewing trash along the way. And then I walked down the end, picked it up, and put all the trash back in, and I was fine by the time I got back. But another time I threw a wrench down and ricocheted off that same trash can and hit a brand new Cadillac in the door. And they just cleaned it up, and it was waxed and everything and ready to be delivered to the customer. And so the service manager called the customer and said when they were cleaning it up, they noticed a flaw in the paint. And so they were going to run up to the body shop and get it taken care of so the car would be perfect for him. And so they covered me on that one, which was kind of embarrassing.
So I want to kind of back up a little bit.
Okay.
So it was really the reading of so the Bible is considered a Mormon, the Mormons accept that as
yeah.
And yet
their version. Yeah.
Right. Their version. Yeah. And yet you hadn't really ever read it. Right.
We'd read parts of Matthew in like a Sunday school class.
Yeah.
But nothing else.
Yeah. And so reading the Bible started to open your eyes to the real God of the Bible.
Oh, yeah. And like the Mormon, like Joseph Smith in John 1, where this is the word was with God and the word was God. He said, it says the word was a God because, there's planets around every star in the universe, and every one of them has a god that
Yeah.
created that planet, and goddess wives to create spirit babies before they go down and become Adam for their earth. Eve comes down and provides that physical body for us so that we can, because the Mormons have a saying, they say, as God is, as man is, God once was, and as God is, man may become. If you
You become your
become
own
a god,
God.
you can become a god, and obviously us men are more heathen than women, so there's more women get saved than men, so that's why you have polygamy.
The thing is, go
Yeah,
back, think about
yeah.
this. Think about this. Like, the first lie of the evil one in the garden was, you will be like God.
The
It's like,
original lie.
yeah. And it's like,
And
you
here it
know,
is, full blown
and then it's
control.
like, it
Yeah,
just keeps working. That lie keeps working, right? You're
yeah,
going to be like God. You're in
yeah,
control. You,
yeah.
you get to be
You
in
can do
control.
this. You get to be the star of the day. This is
And
all about you.
it's
Yeah,
all about you, right?
yeah.
And man, I mean, that still works. It still
It,
sucks people in.
yeah, it still tugs at that place in our ego where we want to be something.
Yeah.
Instead of Jesus said, the greatest will be servant of all.
Yeah.
So that's counterculture for sure.
For sure. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So great point. So
So
yeah, reading the Bible, it just opened my eyes, and yet I was afraid because I didn't know Jesus. So I just knew about him, and so I was afraid it wouldn't be any fun anymore.
well, you
But
think,
what's fun is looking yourself in the mirror in the morning and being okay with that guy.
oh yeah, right.
That's
Because now it
more fun
works.
than any party. Yeah,
It's not works.
not at
You're
all.
not working
Mm.
to earn your salvation.
Yeah, which is impossible.
It's impossible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you have to have some scale, and how do how many helping a little old lady across the streets equate with telling a lie?
Yeah.
What's the scale? What's the value of these things so that I can make sure that this scale's tipped in my favor?
Yeah.
And it's not like that. It's like, yeah, we die to ourselves.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
what
you
our
made, so
desires.
I thought this was really interesting in that when you prayed that prayer,
Mhm.
you asked for professional help. Where did that come from? What was that? What was
It,
that about?
I don't know. It was just because I tried everything on my own. My whole life, I'd just been my own fight, my own battle, my
Yeah.
own, my own trying to be perfect so my dad would notice me. Because with 27 kids, it's like I gave him a pass, and intellectually, how could he be a father to all of us? Yeah, he can father us, but how could he be a good dad? There were just
Yeah.
too many of us. There weren't enough hours in the day. And so I gave him a pass. He said, yeah, of course he couldn't be. Because yeah, he had issues. We all do.
And
You have Jesus. Yeah.
you also shared that you quit swearing.
Yeah.
So you quit swearing. Was it like after that prayer, right after that
Yeah.
prayer?
Right after that prayer. And God said, see, you're new inside. He whispered to me. He
Ah,
said, you are a new creation.
so Holy
And I
Spirit
said,
talking to you,
yeah,
right?
talking to me right out of the gate. It's like, he's like, this kid needs it. He's a mess. So he needs professional help. And he's
He
just the
gave
right
it to you.
person for it. He
He gave
gave
you
it
the
to
best
me.
help he could do. He
Oh
could
my
give you.
gosh. Perfect. Yeah. I got baptized in a bottomless lake, Lake Navajo in Cedar City. It was 34 degrees. The water was. So we all came out shaking and shivering. And
Yeah, but you're
yeah,
never going to forget it.
oh, never. Yeah. And that was a party. And I remember telling the pastor or the music instructor, the choir director, about getting saved when I gave my life to the Lord. I saw him next before I saw Heidi or anybody. I saw him at school, and he teared up, and I thought, what's the big deal? Now I'm just a bucket of tears. God just, every time God touches me, I just start bawling. It's just crazy. And I thought, wow, dude, man up. What's the big deal? And now I'm the worst of them all. But they're a great family, and so here I am, a brand new believer that ends up I gave my life to the Lord on Rhonda's dad's birthday. Is that cool or what?
That is totally cool.
And he was an amazing guy, and we were tight friends because he was a total gearhead, aircraft mechanic and machinist and all that, rode Harleys and just was a terrific guy. And so we just bonded instantly. But yeah, I got saved on his birthday. And And I'm still living in this party house, and God just snatched me out of there so fast. It's like the day after I got saved Friday night. Monday morning, I get a phone call from Oldsmobile offering me a job in Montana as a district service manager. And I said, well, I haven't finished my degree yet. And they said, that's okay. For service, you only have to have a 2-year degree or 2-year equivalent and know the product. Well, I knew the product because working on it every day in the dealership. And so they flew me to Salt Lake my direct boss flew to Cedar City and interviewed me. And I made a good enough impression that his boss, the zone manager, was flying back from a regional meeting in LA, and he arranged to stop in Salt Lake, and they flew me up to Salt Lake. And I met with him and interviewed. My boss had told me I had a mustache. I think I had a full goatee at the time. He says, the zone manager, he hates facial hair. I'm like, dislikes or hates? Hates it. And I'm like, oh gosh. So I shaved it off. And I guess he must have told the zone manager, because when he met me, he's like, you shaved. I said, yeah, for you. He said, good move. So I got hired on. So I still had a full year of college to go. I was going to I had a deal set up with Texas A&M to do graduate work in statistics.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm like, okay, wait a minute, 3 more years of school, 3 more years of student loans, or I get to work with cars and people, my two favorite things, And so I said, okay. And so they put me in Montana, and I put everything I owned, including my car, in the back of a Ryder truck and drove it to Billings, Montana. And I had one phone number. I had called the pastor that had led me to Jesus, called somebody he knew in Denver, and they said, oh yeah, we know this church up in Billings, Billings Bible Church. And it was pretty big, probably 1,200 people. So a pretty big church, way bigger than the five members counting me at that one. And so I had the phone number for the minister of music. And so I pulled into town. I didn't even have the sales manager, Oldsmobile District sales manager's number at that point. And I called him up, and he said, you got stuff in a rental truck, right? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, we made arrangements with one of the elders. He cleaned out his garage, and you can unload it in there, your stuff in there, and so you can return the truck. And I was like, wow, this guy didn't know me from Adam. In fact, they didn't even know I was a Mormon, ex-Mormon at this point, because I was too embarrassed. I thought, oh, they won't accept me if they know that about me. Instead, they just rejoiced. They threw a big party, and it was cool. But this elder and his wife, they opened up their home. They had a little apartment in the basement. They let me move in. And I could have been an axe murderer, and they didn't care. They just knew that I'd given my life to Jesus. And so they opened up their home and their arms and their hearts, and it was just a beautiful experience. But I was on the road 5 days a week. Take off Monday morning, get back Friday night. I had 51 dealers in 5 states. And back then you had to hand sign all the warranty forms. It was still paper forms. And so they didn't get paid unless I swung by there and signed it. And so I had 4 different routes that I would swing every month. I put almost 4,000 miles on a month on my company car.
Oh my gosh.
Get a new car every month. It was crazy. So I wasn't getting discipled. I was just going to church and hearing sermons and singing in the choir. And so we'd have choir practice, and the choir guy would, sometimes we'd pray and stuff like that. So I was picking up things, but I wasn't growing fast, and I wanted to grow fast. I had a lot of questions. And so 6 months in Billings, and I get transferred to Denver, and in the number 1 district in Denver. And so now, instead of having 1 day at home each month to service my local dealer in Billings, I had 1 day out of Denver. I had the Grand Junction, and so I'd either drive over or fly over, depending on how bad the passes were. So 1 day a month I was gone out of town. So I got plugged into a church, and they had a pastor of evangelism and discipleship. I'm like, perfect. And he had a plaque on his desk that said, God so loved the world, he didn't send a committee. I still love that, because it can be sudden meetings are usually a big waste of time. But so he started working with me. We're doing Navigator series, and it was, look up the verse and answer the question. The answers were right in the verse. So if you looked it up, the answer was right there. It wasn't difficult. It just got me more comfortable with the Bible and where things were. And pretty soon I didn't have to look in the index to know where it was. And so I started getting around the Bible pretty good, and we would meet on Tuesdays for lunch and go over it. And one Monday night football. And so I'm watching football, drinking beer, And before I know it, I'm drunk, sitting on the couch, and I drank everything in the fridge, probably a six pack, and went across the street to 7-Eleven and got a case. And I was halfway through that, and God said, now you're interfering with my time. I sucked the air out of the room and sobered up real fast. Hit that
Wow.
button, and I quit drinking overnight. Just like that. Bam. He gave me the grace when he put his finger on it, and I just stopped drinking. And it was probably um, 3 years later, maybe. It was after Rhonda and I got married, and we were at somebody's wedding, and they didn't have any non-alcoholic stuff, so they had champagne. And I never was a big champagne drinker, but anyway, we toasted them. I took a sip and set it down and walked away, and I thought, oh my gosh, that feels good. It's not controlling me now. I can control it. And so I still don't drink. I don't get drunk. I'd be a great alcoholic. I've never had a hangover in my life, and I've been passed out stupid drunk. And so thank God he helped me there. But so many things like that,
Wow.
just waiting for him to touch you. And I've talked to people. They're like, man, they're like, I keep trying to stop smoking, and I just can't. I just can't quit. And I'm like, well, what's God really putting his finger on? And they're like, oh. I said, yeah, you're avoiding that and saying you'll make God happy by quitting smoking. And you don't have any grace for it. Just obey him. The grace will be there. It'll scare you at first because you don't think you can do it. But yeah, just obey him, and all the grace to do it's right there in the package. And so, so
That's a great way to put it. That's an amazing way to put it. I love that so
yeah,
much.
yeah.
And so you'd been freed of the Mormon church. You
Yeah,
were happily married.
yeah,
I think so. I've dealt with Mormonism, as you know, and one of the things I think is it's a brilliant fooling of people. It's
counterfeit.
yeah,
Brilliant
counterfeit. I
Yeah,
mean,
sure.
they even have,
Looks like the real thing.
it looks
Yeah,
like the real thing. They even
they
put Jesus's name in the name of
yeah,
it, right?
and they adopt all the phraseology. They talk
Yes.
about a personal relationship with Jesus and all this stuff,
Yep.
and it's just to make them sound like other Christians, so that if you move to town and the closest church to you is a Mormon church, then it's okay to go there. It's like, no, run away,
Yeah.
people. It's not right. It's not the same.
No.
Yeah, it's
No.
all works based,
It's all works and it's full
yeah,
of deception, and it's not based
control and
on truth.
manipulate. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
based on truth.
But it's brilliant.
Oh yeah, the enemy. No, he's not a dummy.
Evil one's
He's
very smart.
Yeah, he was the anointed one, the bright shining star, the
Yeah.
leader of worship in the heavens, and
Heavenlies. Yeah.
turned his back on God. Yeah. So yeah, he's not stupid. If you think he is, you're going to get fooled. Yeah, you
Yeah.
got to keep your eyes and ears open, and your hand on your Bible.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully, read
Yeah.
and stay in there.
I guess I'd love to ask this question. I was going to maybe ask it later, but I want to ask it now. It's like, if there's if someone Mormon that is watching this,
Uh-huh.
what would you say
Yeah.
to them? How do you approach Mormons, or what would you say to them to understand the truth?
In the forward to my book, I said, first of all, this is not a Mormon bashing book.
Right.
I love Mormon people.
Yeah.
They're some of the most amazing people you'll run across that don't know Jesus.
I totally
That's
agree.
a big if. It's the crux of the matter is you got to know Jesus. And they're wonderful people, and I love them dearly. Have tons of family members that are still in it, and dozens and dozens that have found Jesus, and it's so cool. The other day, one of them was saying, you were the very first one, and I'm like, really? He said, yeah, and I hadn't thought of it that way, and I was like, yeah, we all look up to you. And I'm like, oh gosh, don't look too close. I still got my warts. So, but I hadn't really looked at it that way, because it's not a contest. We're all just the servant, and you can be the greatest in God's eyes, and not other people, but that's okay. His eyes are the ones that are important. Yeah, I just, I'll ask him questions about grace, about, being saved by grace. It's not by works. Ephesians 2. And they go, oh yeah, we believe that. I'm like, but wait a minute. How do you tell me salvation is by grace? They said, yeah. I says, but what about exaltation? Oh yeah, you got to do all the Mormon stuff to be exalted to the highest level of heaven. As poor Joseph Smith, I mean, he probably had a 6th grade education, but he didn't know when he read in Paul's writings about Paul being caught up to the third heaven, that the Jews understood that the atmosphere where the birds fly and all that is the first heaven, and the outer space is the second heaven, and the third heaven is the throne room of God.
Yep.
So he didn't know that, so he makes up this whole silly theology about 3 levels of heaven, and so hell is only reserved for apostates like me and murderers. So they don't minister into prisons.
Well, you and I'll be there together then.
There you go, buddy. And so if you're talking salvation by grace, they're like, yeah, general salvation, that everybody can be saved, and only hell is selected for the few, like me. So it was funny at my dad's funeral, the guy was talking about how, when you turn away from the gospel, then great will be the darkness. And my wife Rhonda is looking at the line of my dad's boys, 12 of us lined up there, and the only 2 that were shining were the two Christians, me and my brother Brian. And he's like, "Yeah, you guys look really dark up there. The darkness hadn't got us." And so that was just a funny aside at his funeral. But so if they're into it, if they know enough to know that exaltation is works-based, you have to do all the ordinances and the doctrines and all that, then they're probably pretty far along in, they're not questioning Mormonism. They're buying it, hook, line, and sinker. But if they're like, "Oh, I don't know about that," well, let me tell you something. Salvation is by grace, but it's not just to get you to a heaven when you die. It's to be with God for all eternity.
Yeah.
And it's only by God's grace. I mean, grace means undeserved favor, undeserved merit, something you didn't earn. So earning your way to heaven doesn't work. That's not what God designed. And I've had a lot of them go, "Wow, I never thought of that." But then too many of them, it's like my whole family would turn on me if I left. I would be persona non grata.
And I understand that a lot of Mormons stay in the Mormon religion, even though they know it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Because of that, they're so afraid to be excommunicated from family, from the community, from everything that goes along with it. And they love it.
They'd lose their business. I knew a realtor, and he's like, "Yeah, I know it's a pile, but I'd lose all my customers if I left. So I jump through the hoops and go through the motions and blah, 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 and I have a good life." And I'm like, "Is that enough?" He says, "Well, feels like it right now. Well, here's my number. Call me when it doesn't feel like it, when it all comes crashing down around your knees. And maybe you can find a different path." But yeah, they stay in it because they don't want to lose family and friends. And yeah, because it's like a pack of wolves, man. They'll turn on you in a heartbeat. I was talking to Fred from our men's group. He called me up because this Mormon kid was selling solar systems or something, solar heat, electrical panels for your rooftop. Going through the neighborhood, his cousin had given him a job because he wouldn't go on a 2-year mission for the church. And so his parents kicked him out, 17 years old, just graduated high school. And they said, "You're out." And didn't give him any money, his cousin paid for him to fly up here and gave him a job, or else who knows? There's a whole subculture in St. George. They call it the Lost Boys, because in the polygamy thing, they're even more vicious. A 15-year-old kid gets caught with a beer in his hand, he's out. Bam. Because they have to cull the herd. They got to get rid of the young bucks so there's more wives for the older guys.
Wow.
And so they actively reject these kids at a heartbeat. And it's just inhuman. It's horrible. And some of these, I've heard of 13-year-olds being kicked out of town.
Wow.
And so the only people they know is their older brother got kicked out 5 years earlier. So they go to stay with them, sleep on the couch, get into drugs and trouble. And they've got no mooring. They're just lost. And it's just so sad. And
that is not, there is no love there. That is no grace. Yeah. There's no love.
It's just vicious.
It is vicious.
And it's so sad. And these kids, and there's just not enough of them know Jesus. That's a whole mission field down there. There's hundreds and hundreds of them. So Sociologists classify them as the Lost Boys. And it's just excommunicated young Mormons that got booted out. And so, yeah, it's crazy. But I have a lot of family that I just love to death.
Sure.
And so I want nothing more, but I know that God God's the one that makes the way. He's the one that prepares their heart. Every salvation story is unique. And that's why I laugh at tracks, I mean, the four spiritual laws, blah, blah, blah. I've never seen that work. I used that 100 times and never saw one person turn to Jesus. Yet I hear stories about the personal nature of God, how he meets us personally.
He solved every blind person he made see, he did it differently. It was always different. And he meets us. And when you were sharing your story, you could just tell that prior to that sharing of saying, I need professional help, that the Holy Spirit was chasing you. He was.
The hounds of heaven were after me big time. The coolest thing is from the time I was probably still a teenager, I'd pick up my nieces and nephews and I'd hug them and then I'd tickle them while they couldn't get away. I'd tickle their ribs and they're squealing and kicking their feet. And I had an experience where we had an evangelist guy come through the church here in Gig Harbor, and I got slain in the spirit. It was crazy because I was a deacon, and so I'm up there catching people that are falling over, and every once in a while somebody would be really heavy. It's like more than what was normal, and then I heard later that
you're a strong dude. You're a big, strong guy.
And the glory of God could be translated the weightiness of God. And I thought, oh, that's why some of them were heavier, because the glory was falling on them. But in this vision, I woke up and I was probably 10 years old. I'm playing marbles with my friends. We're in a circle and we're shooting at the pretty one in the middle, trying to win the marble. And I look up and about 15 feet away, I see God. And I said, guys, that's my daddy. That's my daddy. He puts his arms out to me. I just go running up in his arms and he scoops me up and then he starts tickling me. And I was like, later as I'm analyzing it, I was like, wow, you were watching me my whole life. He selected me from probably when I was in my mom's womb, and it was so personal. At the time, it was just kind of cool. I woke up and I'm leaning against the church pew because all the energy I had sapped out of me, and I was kind of giggling a little bit, and this older guy next to me was chuckling too. And I knew why I was laughing, and so I asked him, well, why are you laughing? He says, well, I was sitting there and I was shaking and I couldn't stop. And then God says, you're shaking and you can't stop. He says, yeah, I know. He says, well, don't you think that's funny? Like you missed the joke. God's sense of humor is so awesome. And so we're both laughing so I told him why I was laughing, because God had tickled me. And took a while, and then it dawned on me that I've done that almost my whole life. And it was so cool and so personal. And he said, I want you to tell others about this. I said, okay. I said, but can I come back? And he said, yeah. I said, okay. So I got up and I'm sitting next to that guy, and the guy that Don Crum was his name, amazing guy, planted 33 churches in West Africa and built a church and a seminary and all this, not a church, but a school and a seminary and all this stuff. And thousands of Africans got saved and following Jesus. And he's just a terrific guy. He never touched one of us, didn't push us over or anything. So when it was like an extended thing, so we had like a Friday night, a Saturday night, Sunday morning, and Sunday night while he was in town. Well, Friday and Saturday night, I'm catching people, and then he's praying for me, and I'm like, well, I'm thinking, no, that's about the same amount of time people stood before they fell over. So I'd kind of lean back and they'd catch me and lay me down, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then Sunday morning, he says, if you fall down on your own, you're still in control. I went, oh. I said, okay, you're gonna have to knock me down, buddy. And I planted my feet and I didn't even feel myself tilt. And I woke up an hour later. Whoa, okay, this is real. And so after having that vision that God was my daddy and holding me and tickling me and stroking my cheek and running his finger through my hair, just so many intimate, beautiful things. Yeah. Once you know that God loves you, you don't need to impress anybody else. It's done. The striving is over, And so he said I could come back. And so I got up and I was able to stand. So I stood behind somebody to catch him, and Don points at me and says, put your hands up. And that's what we do. And bam, I'm down again. And luckily somebody caught me. And I'm laying there, and it's just black and peaceful and quiet. It's just was seeping into me. And then God said, I love you, my son. Well, he paused between I love you, and then he said, my son. I'm gone. I'm just, my ears are full of tears. I'm laying there. And then he put his hand on my chest like he was doing CPR. When he pushed on my chest, I felt electrical current go through my body. I'm just like, and he kept doing it. I said, what are you doing? Because it kind of scared me. He said, shh, I'm doing a deep work in you. And from that point on, I can't even recall it without being moved now, just emotionally, because he gave me a heart of flesh. He took out that stone that was ruling my life. And so I'm just a big blubber baby, as you can see. But it was, deep work.
I
Just like he said,
still giving you professional help.
all the time. He's with me every day.
I want to share that I love how you react to this. This is, and the thing is, I've seen you do this before as a friend. I've seen you. This is nothing new for you to respond this way, because I've heard you share this before, and you just have such a huge love for the Father, and you know that He loves you so intimately.
Oh yeah,
And
it's just
I love
unshakable. Yeah, it's unshakable. And there's that verse there, everything be shaken will be shaken. And I'm like, well, that's unshakable. I know God loves me. Period. End of sentence. Paragraph book. That's it. That's all. That's all I need to know. He'll talk to me and tell me what to do, tell me when I'm being dumb, when I'm not treating my wife the right way. And he's professional. He's really good at it.
Yeah, he's good at it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
So
So yeah, cool
I would
experiences.
love to transition here a bit,
Sure.
and because you said something earlier, and I want
Mm-hmm.
to kind of get to part
Okay.
of this. You said something earlier in that you weren't growing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for a long period of your
6 months. I was up in Montana. Yeah.
yeah, and then ultimately, you wind up here in Gig Harbor. You've got a very successful business here
Mm.
that is an awesome auto repair
It's fun. Yeah.
place, and you treat people fairly, and I love your ethics. So cool about that. And but ultimately it led you to Chapel Hill,
Yeah.
and it led you to a group we call ourselves the Saturdudes. And
Yeah.
talk about that and how that happened. And
Well, it was when we moved up here 33 years ago, no, last November. Uh, we found a church, fell in love, stayed there for almost 10 years. And I've never left a church without leaving the state, getting transferred somewhere. And we felt God calling us to go to a different church. Well, I was being offered a job in Michigan. And so we prayed about it, and we were getting verses like leave, go, flee, depart. And we're like, dang, looks like we're going to Michigan. And they said this was a handpicked job. The first job they offered me in Michigan, I'd be traveling 2 to 3 weeks every month. I'm like, yeah, my wife knows nobody in Michigan. She's not outgoing. She's an introvert, so she's not going to go out and find a friend. This isn't going to be good for our marriage if I'm gone that long. And so they said, okay, fair enough. And so they found me this job that I really thought it'd be a fun job. And they said, well, we have to, put it out there for the whole opportunity so people can put in their resumes and apply for it. But really, it's your job, and it's yours if you want it. And there was hurdles that came up, and we had sewer system problem, and so the house wasn't sellable, and they got that fixed, and there was a bunch of hurdles that just fell into place, and we're like, oh crap, I think we're going to Michigan. And Rhonda woke up one night, and she had a dream that she went out onto the back patio looking at this yard and everything and the fences, and she says, does Sterling Heights mean anything? I'm like, oh my gosh. 3 of the engineers I knew lived in Sterling Heights and worked in Warren, Michigan, where I would have been working. And I'm like, yeah, that's a neighborhood close to work. And she's like, oh crap, we're going to Michigan. And so we put Gig Harbor on the altar. And then the morning that they were going to make the final decision and announce who was getting the job, which was going to be me, my former boss found out about it, thought it was a cool job, and put his application in. And of course, they didn't have to pay moving expenses and everything, so they gave it to my former boss. And we're like, what do we do with flee, go, depart, leave? Lord, what are you telling us? And we realized we'd put the church on the altar too, not just Gig Harbor. And so we'd heard about a church that had just, a new pastor had come in and was changing things up. And we went to the first meeting went to was January 25th of 80. And the pastor spoke about how the church had elevated the worship above the throne. And I'm like, huh? Tell me more. And he says, yeah, you ever notice how the worship is kind of the warm up so that all the late people can get there before the preaching? It's all about the preaching. It's not about the worship. And he says, we are going to be a worshiping church. And I almost stood up and threw my hands in the air and gave a big hoot because I was like, yes, that's what I'm looking for. And so we talked to the pastors and elders and deacons and the other youth group workers that we were involved with, and explained to them that whole process I just shared with you. And so they hugged us and loved us and released us. It's so weird that so many Christians feel like if they don't sling dirt at the old church, then they don't feel justified to leave. And it's like, no, you should get on your face and find out if that's where you're supposed to be.
Exactly.
And if you're supposed to be there, then be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And so I touted that for so many years, and it's like, oh God, you're moving us. So we went to that church, and they made me a deacon, and we were involved in a lot of leadership stuff. And for the most part, it was really good, but underneath was a lot of control, and it finally came undone. And so we'd go to visit a different church in the harbor, and there'd be 5 or 6 people from that old church, and they'd come running up, oh, we're so glad you got away. And it's like, no, we didn't get away. We're not your trophy. Okay, just leave us alone. It doesn't validate you leaving because we're here.
Right.
It was just weird. So yeah, anyway. So then we went to a church with some YWAM friends of ours that we'd known for quite a while, and they had started a church, and so we went there, and like a year and a half into it, they felt called to Tucson, and we're like, you're going without us, and I'm not moving to Tucson. Sorry, Gig Harbor's my home. When we moved here in '91, after a couple months, I told Rhonda, I think I'll quit GM before I leave Gig Harbor. Ended up being prophetic, and so I wasn't going to go to Tucson, and so we still support them, but we started watching church on TV. Well, extrovert like me, that wasn't cutting it. I didn't have brothers around, and I didn't have believers in my business, and I just felt myself sliding, slowly sliding from God's will and from the affection of my wife. I was like contemplating an affair, and I'm like, that's not me. Doggone it, stop it. And I was alone.
If the evil one if he can divide isolate us.
And he was trying to isolate me. He was doing a pretty good job. Yeah. And our mutual buddy, Dean Anderson, was a customer at the shop. He's a pretty handy mechanic himself, but he didn't have a lift at home. And so if he needed something done, he'd bring it to me, and we'd talk, and then we'd talk about his truck, And he came and invited me to come to Dudes, SATUR-DUDES, and I'm like, I'm in right away, because I knew that was what I needed. I needed male friendship. I needed male accountability, relationship, all those things that ground us, I mean, the fun stuff, chopping wood and all that, that's like the peak of the iceberg. But Saturday mornings, that's the 90% of the iceberg that's under the water that you don't see, that makes that sucker not tip. And that's
well said.
I was praying about that. God gave me that illustration, and I think it fits really beautifully. And so you guys saved my life. I believe.
Yeah. They saved my life too.
Yeah. And so, it's just, we're meant to be in fellowship together, and especially men, because we carry so much weight, and sometimes we try and be perfectionists, and that's a trap. I found out I was a perfectionist, but I just demanded perfection from everybody else but myself. It's like, ooh, that's the worst kind of perfectionist. But we need it. It's life-giving, and we're lone wolves otherwise, and we get picked off. The biggest, baddest wolf that's all by himself is going to go down. The toughest lion out there, the toughest elephant by himself, he's going to get picked off. So it's so critical.
So when you started coming,
I
mean, did it resonate right away with you?
Oh, yeah, right away. The first Saturday I came, Orlando comes in, and Gerald says, well, anybody have something they need to unpack? And Orlando was having trouble, and conflict in the home, and he just bared his soul, and I'm like, oh my God, this is incredible. And nobody judged it, and nobody sucked the air out of the room, and oh my goodness, and there was no religious atmosphere, and it was just love and acceptance, and let's walk alongside this guy and pray for him. And so I got it right out of the gate. I got an example of what was in store. And I've seen it over and over and over. So
We've all
beautiful.
taken that turn
Yeah,
of blowing it.
exactly. Dummy, wake up. This isn't right. But we have
But
trusted brothers that we can talk to
yes.
about it. And they're not going to look at me differently. Oh, boy. They
Well, and
just
the
say,
thing is
yeah,
that God says to put these things in the light, right? And inherently,
that's
we
what it's
don't want to
doing.
do it. We want to hide it. But then once we bring it out into the light, it's freeing.
It shrivels. It's like, yeah, Jesus never rebuked the darkness. He just shone the light.
Yeah.
And it's automatic. Darkness has to flee or disappear. And yeah, so I remember some of the high points in my memories of dudes was cutting wood, the dean and the guys, and Dean was just, the dude is such a leader. He just exudes leadership. It's like everybody looks to him. Okay, what do we do? And he just, and everything goes smoothly. He's just a brilliant guy,
Yeah.
and so modest and humble too, which is such a rarity.
Yeah,
So I remember
100%.
chopping wood and had such a great time, sweating and working and with brothers that you love, and then one of the other highlights that I thought of was taking you guys around the racetrack in my car.
I
And
missed that. And I missed
yeah,
that.
I'm sorry, buddy. That was so much fun.
Everybody came back
Sharing
on. It was so much fun, but everyone was like, it scared me out of my mind.
which was what I was going for.
You achieved it.
It was so fun. Just share a passion of mine and get out on the track and share it with the guys. That was a blast. We did that a couple Saturdays in that first year, I think, or the first year that I had the car and set it up for racing and all that. But so much fun. But that's a fun memory, but that's the tip of the iceberg. The good stuff is under the water.
Yeah,
and
the good
that's
stuff
the
is when
foundation.
we come in on a Saturday, and I mean, just what, like 2 Saturdays ago, we started talking about driving, how we drive, and the
Getting so
whole
angry.
time, 2 hours worth of issues about driving and relating.
Controlling our anger.
Yes, and we're all spewing about this, right? We're all talking about this.
Yeah,
It's like
it's so funny. It's a universal thing,
Yeah.
It was funny because the therapist that I had, he was helping me with anger, and he finally asked me. He says, "Well, is there somebody that you'd never yell at?" I'm like, "Yeah, Lowell Claver from my men's group. He's such a nice guy. I'd never yell at Lowell."
Never.
He says, "Well, I want you to picture Lowell in that car that you're angry at." And so I'd say, "Okay, Lowell, a little faster. Any day now." But I wasn't angry. I was just joking with myself and talking to this car in front of me, and assuming that Lowell was the driver. And when I shared that at the group, he just laughed and laughed. He loved it as much as everybody else. And so there's just so many deep individuals. We're all deep. We all have a story. It's worth telling. I love what you do, Ken.
Well, I appreciate that. That's why, I am doing this, because everybody's story should be heard. You don't know somebody until you know their story. And that's one of the things, over the years, we've shared our stories, but you kind of reshare some of those, you relive some of those things. And some of those things the Band-Aid needs to be ripped off so you can heal from some of those things. And we've talked about things that have been painful in our past. You've talked about, how, how it's impacted you emotionally, being one of 26, 27 kids, and having a dad that basically ignored you, and fighting for recognition. And so
driven, I'm 1,500 miles away, and I still trying to win so my dad will notice me, and it's like, hello, McFly, he's not here, but I was driven by that father wound. And when God touched me I was arguing with God because he told me, now forgive your dad. And I'm like, but I did forgive him because I forgave him for raising me as a plig kid, which was a big stigma in Salt Lake, and 99% Mormons. And then God showed me a vision, and I was 5-year-old kid trying to crawl up on my dad's lap, and he's pushing me down because he's watching TV. And so I just lost it and forgave him for loving TV more than me, forgave him for loving sports more than me. And the switch was flipped. I didn't care anymore if I won or lost. I was having fun playing the sport with my friends. And before, oh my gosh, if we lost, it was your fault. I was in your grill and it was ugly. And you'd probably walking away saying, what a jerk. And I was a bull in a china closet with people's emotions. And I had no clue. I was just clueless because I was striving to get my dad's approval. And I'd already had that experience of, no, when I had the vision of him being my papa and jumping up his arms was after I had forgiven my dad. And the craziest thing was my dad had 12 boys, and my brother, just older than me, lived in the basement of my mom and dad's retirement home. And so he would say, Happy Father's Day and happy birthday. But I was his only son of the rest that would call him on Father's Day and on his birthday. And I'd say, I love you, Dad. And he'd say, I know. That was it. I didn't get any other response. And I'm dying for I love you too, son. Not getting it. And because that I love you had a hook in it. It's like, I need you, feel my needs and be there for me kind of a hook.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't bite. He wasn't taking the bait. And as soon as I forgave him, I didn't say diddly squat about forgiving him. I said, I love you, Dad. And he says, I love you too, son. And I could have fallen on my chair. It was like, what? Can you repeat that, please? And I was thinking to myself, but I set him free and he was free to love me. And so we ended up having a terrific relationship. When he died, so many of my brothers were just torn up because so many words unsaid, and that they wished they would have been, but I'd said them all. My dad and I were solid. And so I was able to share some of those things about my forgiving him and what the difference it made between us when we met up after the funeral at a restaurant in town. And there wasn't a dry eye in the place, including mine. And it really ministered to my brothers. And a lot of them are walking with Jesus now, and I'm so happy. So happy.
That's such a beautiful story. I'm so glad I've heard that story before, but I'm so glad you shared it because it is so powerful in that, forgiveness is so powerful and it's for us, right?
It's important too.
It's so important.
Learn that.
Yes.
He said, if you don't forgive, then you're not going to be forgiven. So that's a wake up call. I think there's some.
It's not optional.
We have to learn to forgive.
Right.
And it brings so much life back into your life.
Yes. And it's freeing. It's it's just like the weight is off your shoulders, right? In forgiveness. And you know what? The Lord's Prayer, addresses it, right? Forgive us as we forgive those that, have
wronged us.
Have wronged us.
We're in our right.
We have to forgive because we have been forgiven a debt we could never pay back. Never pay back.
Yeah. And so it's mandatory, but it's for our own good that it's mandatory.
It is. It's for our own health. And people think it's like, well, Candy and I were watching, we were doing something the other night and like, I hate this show. Like 48 Hours is on and we're just doing something else and it's going in the background and stuff. Right. And of course it's always about somebody that got murdered. Kind of thing. And I just hate all of that kind of thing. But what was really sad, we kind of perked up at the end of this because they'd figured out who did it years later, of course, and all this kind of stuff. And the mother of this her daughter was murdered, and it was like a decade or plus later, and she was still so bitter, like just bitter. And it was like, oh, this is so sad. This is so sad that this woman just has all this bitterness, and it's going to impact every aspect of your life.
You're alive.
And God tells us, nope, sorry, not optional. You got to even forgive someone who murdered your kid.
Yeah,
you have to.
We murdered his son. I would have been in the crowd yelling, "Crucify him!" We tell ourselves differently, but no, I'd have been right there. And that was
Absolutely.
funny. I've heard the phrase. We've all said it. If you were the only person on earth, then Jesus would have still come and died for your sins. And then the Lord, it hit me. And it's like, that means that my sins were enough to crucify Jesus.
Crucify him. Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, that puts the shoe on the other foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a little more ownership of the cause and effect. And, yeah, none without blame.
Really quick, I'm just going to share a picture. This picture, but I'll share it anyway, and just kind of would love to
get my reaction.
Yeah. What do you think when you see this?
Oh man, I remember that day. Ron and I have had, this puppy we're getting will be the 9th of that breed that we've had in our 38 years of marriage. She had one when we met, and I was the only guy the dog didn't bark at ever, of any guy that came by the house. And her roommate owned the house and lived upstairs, and so she'd have guys come over, and the dog would bark at him. And I came to pick up Rhonda for our first date, and she never barked at me once. And Rhonda went, "Oh, interesting." So I just,
dogs are good judging.
Dogs go to heaven.
As far as I'm concerned, if heaven's going to be as cool place as I think it's going to be, that dog's going to be there. One's right here with me right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great picture, and I was glad to get up front. Smitty's with us.
Yeah.
Dean's over. Man, Dean had a lot of hair back then. Scott's standing in the back, and Dean, a couple tall dudes.
Well, and it's just so cool because
that's
the core. That was the core of that group.
Yeah,
for the most part. And we were all there that day. Yeah. So it means so much to me in that it's the guys, it was Keona's last week of life. And this is one of my favorite pictures.
Yeah, me too. I have it in my phone, and it gets covered up by other stuff, and so I'll send it to myself and get it back and put it so it's up close on my picture, because I love that photo. That was early on in my time with you guys, but it didn't feel like it, because everybody just embraced me, warts and all. It was just been, like I said, this is life.
Well,
I feel for guys that don't have this, because it's so critical.
Exactly. I mean, the thing is, I look at this picture and I see, and what's crazy about there's 12 guys there. There's 12.
There you go. Cool. And I was about to count, so thanks for saving me.
There's 12 guys in that picture, I love every one of you. I know I could call and ask anything of you guys, and I think you all could feel the same way about each other, right? And we have lived life together. We have shared life together. And really the point of this podcast is to get other men inspired to do that. Do that. And to I mean, go and celebrate your dog's life with your best friends, right? I knew I was going to put her down that coming Friday. That was a Saturday, and I knew I only had a week left with her. And
you shared her with us. That was just beautiful.
I had to. I knew you all knew her, but it's like some reason she had to come and be there that day. And then we captured this picture. And the thing is that I'm so grateful for all these men in this picture. And my heart is that everybody needs a story in Jesus and how we grow, but also every Christian man, every guy that's following Jesus needs this. They need this. Yeah. They need a band of brothers that forge life together. And through that, it comes great transformation, because I know personally, I grew massively through these guys, because of these guys. Literally,
Jim talks about that. It's for him, it was just a shot of adrenaline, and it's like, oh my goodness, looking back, I mean, he didn't know how to talk to the Father and listen to his voice. And now it's like every morning he's up 5 o'clock to have time with the Lord. And it's like, wow, what a beautiful transition for him. And we could say that about every one of those.
Every one of them.
What's sad to me is that at one point we grew to almost 24.
Yeah.
And so we didn't know what to do because people didn't have enough time to share their woes and get some prayer and healing and all that stuff that happens in an intimate group. It was just too big. And it was losing some of its specialness. And I wish we had a mechanism to, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to split the group because then, because we did that, we would watch a video and then we'd separate into two groups and discuss it and then come back for prayer requests and things. But I was like, dang it, Ken's in the other group. But I was with Dean, so that was cool, and I was with Rick and some other guys. But it's like, oh crap, I'm not with G and Ken and Jim. And it was like, yeah.
It was painful.
It went slowly. It dwindled down to about 6 or 7 of us, and then it started building back up.
And now,
and now we're back at busting at the seams.
Again. And the cool thing is that we've got younger guys now coming in, and we're able to pour into those guys more, right? We're more at a sage kind of place. It's not like we've arrived because we haven't arrived. Just personally, I have not arrived. Okay.
But we've done the heavy lifting already.
Yeah.
And so we can take a back seat. And if we got an issue, I can call you up. I can call Jim up. I can call any of these guys and go out and have a beer or coffee or whatever. And bare my soul and get some help. And so we already have those relationships. And so it is beautiful to pour into the young kids and see them coming alive. And so we can take a back seat, just let them bare their souls and share their woes.
And I love that I love that being in that stage of life where we can do that, right? And so, and then we've got one guy in the group that's going to be leaving in July to go into full-time ministry and seminary. He's not coming back, and yet he knows he knows that one of his big the reason he's been in Dudes is knowing that that's going to be part of his ministry moving forward, and that's what we need.
And he'll have this foundation under him. He knows he can call any of us any time of day or night.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're leading, it's like a lonely place and you're pouring yourself into a bunch of needy people, and pretty soon you're running dry and you need a brother to talk on the phone and pump and build your batteries back up, so you can go back in and into the fight again.
Yeah.
And so Matt's not going away empty-handed. That's for sure.
For sure.
And what a blessing he's been to us.
Oh, massive.
Massive. Yeah. That's the right word.
Yeah.
I just, we need this.
Yeah.
We really do.
And so, Howard, I just appreciate you coming on and doing this and sharing your story. Your story is awesome. It's such an awesome story that God got a hold of you. I feel the same way
about your story, man. It's so amazing, so full of grace and mercy and growth and just wisdom.
And we're still growing, right? We're still growing in grace.
Till the day I die. Yeah, we're asking questions and letting God answer them.
We don't arrive this side of glory, but that's what makes actually this fun. To be honest with you. Because we're constantly growing, we're constantly learning, we're constantly being molded in the likeness of Jesus. And
every day's a new adventure. It really is. Every day is a blessing. Vertical and taking nourishment. We're lucky. I don't know. Paul says to die is gain, so there's a little of that.
Yeah.
But I got to tell you one closing story about my mom. So she's 94 or 5. After her 90th birthday, which was May 16th or 14th is her birthday. And every year, my uncle, her brother, just younger than her, didn't have any kids. And when he died, he had about $1.5 million in assets and stuff. And so he had set up a trust with Wells Fargo to educate the family. And so they all went, how many kids, how many people are in your mom's tree? Well, at 90, we sat down and counted noses. It was over 400 descendants. She died at 98 and a half. And so the bottom of the tree is pretty wide, so it could be 800 by now, It's just that they did a 6th generation photograph. I told you about that. But my mom, so I go to see her. So in August, we'd have our scholarship meeting to give out these scholarships to family members. And so I would go down early. The meeting would be, we'd golf Monday afternoon and have a meeting Tuesday morning, usually golf Tuesday afternoon in August in Vegas. How dumb is that? 110 degrees. Ugh, just not fun. But I would fly down on Friday night and go up to get a car and drive up to St. George to stay with my brother. And the next day, Saturday morning, we'd go to Colorado City and see my mom. So she was running a thrift store in town. And so it was open to the public. So it was no big deal. We'd come in. Well, they shut that down and kind of shut down any public access businesses in town, except for the gas station. If people were going out to Lake Powell or something. And so we had to start meeting in the park. And so I'd call my sister Connie that had the 15 kids, and she'd tell me when we're meeting and what time and stuff like that. So I called her up and I said, so when are we meeting Mom? And she says, well, it's kind of funny you'd ask. And I'm like, yeah. And she said, we don't know where she is. I'm like, you're kidding me. You lost her? The heck? You lose old ladies. Right. And I was this close to calling the FBI because it's like, they did something to my mom and we've got to find her. And I went down to Vegas on Monday and we're having lunch before golf, and my cousin from Wisconsin is there and he says, so how's the family? And I says, it's funny you should ask. We don't know where my mom is. And he said, well, come with me. And we stepped outside and he says, she's with my mom in Wisconsin. I'm like, what? Well, they kicked her out of town to go repent because they came knocking door to door, some of the deacons and elders, and with the new prophet's book. And so they said, this is the new prophet's book. Do you believe it? She said, well, give it to me. I'll read it and let you know. They said, no, this is the prophet's book. So she's supposed to say, of course I believe it because he's the prophet. She wouldn't do it. So they said, do you have any family that's not apostates like me? And she said, yeah, I've got a sister in Wisconsin. So we'll call her up and see if you can stay with her for a while. And of course she said, of course. And so she threw some clothes in a suitcase and they drove nonstop to Wisconsin through the night, pulled up the curb, got her out, set the suitcase on the sidewalk and drove away. No. Around the curb, yeah, in Wisconsin. And of course, so then the next, so I get a call about October from my cousin. And he says, we got to do something about your mom. I was like, what? You're driving Charlie crazy. So his stepdad, Charlie, my Aunt Marie's husband. And so she's always run the family, and so she's running everything and she's trying, and Charlie's going crazy. He's like, and so we got her a place, and my sister Lucy moved up and they shared an apartment. And but she was about 94 and she called her up and I could tell she was, and I'm like, what's up, Mom? So sorry, I skipped a part. So I told him, I says, was she at the family reunion? Because my Aunt Marie had a reunion every year at their cabin up at Lake Nebagaman, which is about half an hour from Duluth, Minnesota, on the Lake Superior. And I asked if she was there, and he said, yeah, that's where I saw her. I said, I'm coming next year. Don't say anything. And so I showed up and surprised her. And of course, she was over the moon and just sat on my lap most the whole time, the whole weekend. And my aunt asked her, she said, are you okay with this? Because she knew she wasn't supposed to. Because the other thing he told me is she's with my mom in Wisconsin, and she doesn't want me to tell you because she's sent away to repent. And they weren't supposed to have association with their apostate children. So my aunt says, are you okay with this? And she said, I didn't initiate it. So that gave her a free pass. And so I was the only one that she would allow to call her. And so I'd call her every Sunday and talk to her for, 8 years. And I said, you're kind of down, Mom. And she says, yeah, I've just really been thinking about where I'm going to go when I die. And I'm like, well, don't you know that Jesus loves you? And she pauses. She said, no. I'm like, Mom, he's crazy about you. And I just started speaking these words of life over her. I had probably 15 minutes, just the Spirit was just flowing through me. And when I got done, she said, will you text that to Lucy so she can read it to me every night before I go to bed? And I did one better. I emailed it to her and she printed it out. And my mom read that every night before she went to bed. Just how much Jesus loved her. She starts telling me how she'd have a pain in her hip or something. And she'd ask Jesus what was causing it. And he'd tell her what to do to fix it. And she'd do it and it'd go away. And she had this dialogue with Jesus. And so I have no doubt that she's waiting for me up in heaven.
Yeah. So cool.
So when she passed, I was at peace. It was right in freaking COVID. And so they had pictures of this, though she grew up in Flagler, Colorado, and had pictures of the church that was just packed to the rafters and not a mask in the whole place, and it's like, yeah, probably glad I didn't go. Everything I would have said was said. She knew there was nothing left unsaid between us. But yeah, I was so glad that I was able to just encourage her. But she knew there was something there, and she read it every night for over 8 years.
That is such a blessing.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
so cool.
so such a tremendous blessing.
You were a good, faithful son.
Well, I had some professional help.
You did. You had the
He's
best
good at it.
professional help you could have asked for.
And
That's awesome. Well, I think that is
that's a
the
good
perfect
ending.
note to end on.
I agree. We came full circle with the professional help thing and had our jokes and our puns and our laughs.
Awesome, man. Howard, I love you so much and so grateful you've been in my life and are in my life. And this has been an awesome experience. And
for me too, it's so good to they placed altars because it was to remind them of the goodness of God and the faithfulness.
Yeah.
Every time we get to retell those stories, it just builds our own faith. Remind us how good He is. Oh,
yes. Yeah.
So
well,
again, I'm honored to be on your podcast, buddy.
Thank you. I'm so grateful you're here. I'm so grateful we made it through the technology issues. It felt attacked. It really did, because we knew it'd be like this. We knew we had something awesome. So it truly was awesome. And so, Howard, I love you, brother. And
you're getting really good at this, man. Keep going.
I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. And I'm going to be like you too. I'm going to be an author. I'm working on
there you go, man. Yeah, I love that. Can't wait to read it. Okay, so take care.
Absolutely. And I will see you Saturday.
Yes, I can't wait. All right. Special hugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Love you. See you later.
Love you. Bye.